Welcome to this episode of our program, Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing an important topic. Tonight we'll be shedding light on the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, which has kicked off a few days ago. It comes amid this global geopolitical divide, and definitely there is no clear topic to dominate the general debate of the UN General Assembly's meetings, as none of the aforementioned ones, particularly the big ones, are really topping the agenda of the scene. The high-level meetings were set to convene at the backdrop of an ongoing already war, new political crisis in West Africa and Latin America, and the lingering coronavirus pandemic, economic instability, widening inequality, fresh natural disasters in the forms of devastating earthquakes, floods and fires. For the past 2 years, there has been the corona pandemic that was followed by the Russian war in Ukraine, and throughout all the periods we've seen the climate change and its devastating repercussions on the whole globe. In face of this, the theme of this year's general debate is rebuilding trust and reigniting global stability, accelerating action on the 2030 agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, represented by his deputy Amina Mohammed, delivered a message emphasizing the critical juncture the world finds itself in, and acknowledged that the existence of profound global challenges, but urged a proactive approach rather than succumbing to pessimism. Guterres stressed the importance of leaving no one behind and creating a world of hope and promise to all. Leave no one behind, the theme of Egypt, the new republic. Anyway, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is there representing Egypt, where he delivered Egypt's vision so far in the high-level meetings that he attended. We'll be focusing on the UN General Assembly's meetings so far, and we'll be discussing this in our topic tonight, or in our episode tonight. Before we delve into our discussion, let's first have this quick report. And Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry calls for international cooperation to support humanitarian response in Sudan. Let's watch.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry called for international cooperation to support the humanitarian response in Sudan and the region. Shoukry was speaking at a ministerial meeting organized by Egypt in cooperation with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the African Union, the European Union, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR. The meeting was held on the sidelines of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA 78, in New York. In his speech, Shoukry expressed Egypt's solidarity with Sudan and reiterated its commitment to assisting the nation during the ongoing crisis. He also reviewed Egypt's political and humanitarian efforts since the start of the crisis in April, particularly through the Sudan Neighboring Countries Initiative. Furthermore, the Egyptian Foreign Minister highlighted Egypt's humanitarian efforts, including providing aid to 310,000 Sudanese refugees and offering medical and psychological support. Shoukry also emphasized that Sudan's neighbors should not shoulder the crisis alone to avoid straining public services, jeopardizing peaceful coexistence and instigating irregular migration. He called for equitable burden sharing and the fulfillment of financial pledges from countries to address humanitarian crises. The ministerial meeting was attended by representatives from over 50 countries and organizations. In addition, Shukri led the second meeting of the foreign ministers of Sudan's neighboring countries, Egypt, Chad, Central African Republic, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Libya, and South Sudan, held at the headquarters of the Permanent Mission of Egypt to the UN in New York. Representatives from the Arab League, the AL, and the African Union, the AU, attended the meeting organized by Egypt and Chad as one of the outcomes of the N'Djamena meeting in August. During the meeting, the foreign ministers adopted a roadmap to address the ongoing crisis in Sudan, formulated during the first meeting in N'Djamena. The roadmap outlines specific actions to be taken in the political, security, and humanitarian spheres to support the Sudanese people in achieving stability and upholding their sovereignty. The meeting also reviewed the present efforts of Sudan's neighboring countries to resolve the crisis and the talks these countries had with various Sudanese parties. The top diplomats also discussed priorities for the next phase, including implementing practical measures to achieve a sustainable ceasefire in Sudan and rallying international support to address the humanitarian situation. The foreign ministers agreed on holding the third meeting of the foreign ministers of Sudan's neighbors in Cairo to assess the progress in implementing the roadmap. Also on the sideline of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, Shukri met with his counterparts from Canada, Croatia, and Sierra Leone on Tuesday to discuss the situation in Sudan, bilateral relations, and the global economic crisis. Separately, the top diplomat said that Egypt is looking to expand energy cooperation with Turkey, which is already one of the largest importers of Egyptian gas, during an interview aired on TRT World. On the same day, during his speech at the UN General Assembly, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan emphasized the progress in Egypt-Turkey relations. And in another meeting, Shukri affirmed Egypt's unwavering support to the Global Development Initiative, the GDI, since its launch in September 2021, during his participation in a high-level meeting of the GDI's Group of Friends that was held upon a Chinese invitation.
Right, welcome back, and let me welcome our distinguished guest, Professor Ahmed Mostafa Safty, Professor of Economics. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. When reading into the scene at the or the convening of the 78th UNGA session of this year, at the backdrops, or the scene, and how do you view the importance of this year's very important session?
Well, frankly speaking, I think lots of countries have lost interest in what's going on with the General Assembly. This is the 78th, right? Do you remember the decisions taken in the 77th, or the 76th, or the 75th, or the 75th?
I would have, if they were implemented.
This is the idea. So this is, now let's look to who attended these sessions, okay? A very few number of presidents attended this session. Most of them either Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Prime Ministers, okay? Why is that? Loss of interest. Why are they losing interest? Because they keep having those meetings, they keep taking decisions, and then nothing is implemented, okay? The idea is the General Assembly meeting have really lost that kind of power that it used to have 15 or 20 years ago, okay? That led to those meetings happen, side meetings happening inside those assemblies, okay? As it was just said in the report, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sameh Shokri, had a side meeting with 50 different countries to discuss the problem of Sudan, okay? So why the side meeting? Why was not those issues discussed in the General Assembly itself, okay? Because the idea is small meetings. We are moving from huge meetings for the whole nations who are the members of the General Assembly, who are moving to those meetings which there is countries of interest taking decisions. This can happen whether it's inside the United Nations or outside of the United Nations, okay? The idea is the fact that the decisions being taken is not being implemented makes those meetings less and less and less important. The United Nations was found after the Second World War to avoid a third world war, right or not?
Yes, indeed.
This is exactly why it was launched in the very beginning, okay? Now, everyone sees what's going in the world. The Russian invasion to Ukraine, that's not two countries in war. That's like two different worlds in war. That's like Europe and the States on one side supporting Ukraine, Russia, China, South Korea from the other, North Korea from the other side supporting Russia in its war, okay? And few countries in between, either having some sort of empathy to this side or to that side, but not very active, okay? So what we are going through right now is like a preparation or a kind of a third world war, okay? This is happening on the military side, okay? If you look to the economic side, the same thing is happening, okay? This is the idea.
You've pinpointed your finger on the most important issue, that it comes at the backdrop of the unprecedented geopolitical or global geopolitical divide that has ever been seen since the World War II.
That's right. And nothing is being done about it.
Challenge to peace and wars and regional conflicts. How do you view that? How do you view how this world body dealt so far with ongoing, I'm not going to speak about the past ones, but the ongoing ones already, and how it deal with all those conflicts?
Okay, now, in the last 20 years, we have went through a lot. I'm not going to look to the past, but the idea is what we are facing right now is the result of what happened in the past. For example, the Israeli problem. Since when it's being discussed in the United Nations? Since 1948, right?
Ever since it happened in the first place.
Anything happened? Nothing. Anything happened by the political efforts? Nothing. All what happened was because of different wars. It was because of 1967, then 1973, then the peace treatment, which the United Nations had nothing to do with it. It was just Egypt, USA, and Israel, right? That's in 1977. These are the main developments happening in this issue, okay? Now, side by side, there's other developments like the Gulf countries having some sort of political relations and economic relations with Israel and so on, with the help of the United States, or under the stress from the United States, whether either this or that. It's the same result at the end. United Nations has nothing to do with that. Now, what's happening step by step? What is going on? What's going on is that the USA is trying to be the boss of the world, okay? The only power that is putting or pushing everyone to do exactly what they want. This itself was very harmful to the whole world. In the last 10 years, we have seen different economies falling down. While the American economy is standing, it's not standing because it's a powerful economy. It's standing because of those economies which is suffering as a result of those kind of actions. One year after another.
Even the United States economy is very much affected, particularly those days, and it is very much suffering from great inflation, maybe not seen since the 1930s.
That's right. But how would you compare it with what's happening in Turkey?
Never.
I'm
No,
not going
no,
to say
definitely.
African countries. I'm not going to mention the African countries. I'm not going to mention countries which was occupied after the Second World War or those progressing economies. I'm saying compare it to what's happening in Turkey. That's a very developed country. That's a country
One
which,
of the NATO
that's right.
members.
This is one of the countries 5 years ago we were seeing it booming. Okay. Now, if you compare what's happening in the United States with what's happening in Turkey and what's happening in Egypt, you will find quite a difference, right or not? So they are not suffering in the same way or in the same percent or the same weight. Okay. Now, going back to where we are again, what did that lead to? We are going through a huge technological revolution. The nature of the industry is changing. Okay, after the Industrial Revolution, we have had lots of changes going around the world. The nations which which initiated the Industrial Revolution was so keen to be in charge for the world resources to be able to support their progress. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, we're not going through industrial revolution, we're going through technological revolution.
Yes, indeed.
In the technological revolution, the givings are different. Why is that? The leading power in this technological revolution is China. One of the countries which was being looked at as a developed country some time ago. Okay? Now, if we see what's going on, we'll find out that China is leading this technological revolution. That's a change in the nature of the economy itself. China, due to this fact, has lots of surplus of investment. Okay? They are the main nation, or the main economy, which is almost debting all the other parts of the world. Okay? China, from their point of view, now we are a huge economy. We are one of the biggest economies. Actually, they are exceeding the American economy if we take some things in consideration. Okay, we need a part of the authority. We need to have a voice in changing things. Okay, they started to invest in Africa, starting from the very South Africa, going upwards. Okay, they started to invest in different countries. They started to invest even in the Gulf area itself. They started to have investments in the Gulf area, North Africa. Regions which used to be territories governed by the United States in before. Okay? Biden, when he came to the presidency during the election period, it was stated, he stated this very clearly. We need to go back with the Chinese economy. Okay? We have concentrated so much on the Middle East that we have lost focus on what's going on with China and Russia. We need to go back with those economies 10 or 15 years backward. Okay? This was one of the main things he said during his election period of time. Okay? How is he going to go backward with those two huge countries, two huge economies? He has to get them involved in some sort of war. Okay? That's what he was planning to do since he came to the presidency of the United States. Who heard this? Those two huge, big countries. They are not countries to obey what Biden wants. That's not the idea. Okay, India is taking their part, by the way. India now is taking, which used to be one of the major allies for the United States.
India is taking different,
But that's a change.
different directions.
That's a change itself.
But you said it in the most perfect way. Those countries are not abiding by the rules, will
Yes.
not be abiding by the rules. But the issue is that it is becoming the interests of the United States vis-a-vis the interests of China, but the whole world is in between.
Yes.
And that in itself is something to be discussed. I mean here, that we have seen some of the initiatives that were raised by the US president, particularly in the Middle East, that reflects only how to crush the Chinese interests, but nevertheless, we're not speaking about the Middle Eastern interests.
That's right.
I mean, here, how do you view that, and how is that reflecting on the scene?
Well, I need to go back to the United Nations scene, okay, a little bit. what's the most strong organization in the United Nations? The Security Council.
Security Council,
Right or
indeed.
not?
Yes.
This is the most strong organization in the United Nations. This used to be, for years and years, okay, a strong council which rarely had some sort of different points of view. Okay? Now imagine that China, a main role player in that council, Russia is another main role player in this council, is having a huge difference in the point of view with the United States and its allies on the other way. That means that the strongest body at the United Nations is being divided.
And France and Britain in the half. Or let me say, France in the middle.
That's right. France is actually, they are in a position that they cannot be envied, okay? Because they know that the States is not the best ally, okay? They are going to consume Europe resources in this war, okay? What's happening in Ukraine, if under any circumstances went further than this, who's going to be affected? Europe first, okay? The same problem which happened in the Second World War.
Actually, the whole world,
Yes,
in fact, except for those countries.
What's the nearest borders, okay,
Europe.
to Ukraine? This is Europe, okay? So what's running in the scene here is not satisfying neither to France nor to Germany, by the way. They are being pushed to what they are doing right now, okay? They are being pushed by being part of the NATO. But I understand Germany used to have very strong ties with Russia. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, Germany has
Nord Stream 1 and 2.
This is the idea.
Yes, indeed.
So they used to depend on the energy with Russia. To that point, they became very closely tied. Okay, but yet, one very important part, is Ukraine going to be part of the NATO at any time? No, that's not going to happen. The NATO, when they rejected Ukraine being part of the NATO, it was because of different things. They have different nature in Ukraine. Europe and the States, they are suffering from the Ukrainian mafia. Okay? They are suffering from the organized crime coming from the Ukrainian borders. Okay? The system, the political system and the social system in Ukraine, and the non-transparency of the wealth is going around in Ukraine does not match at all the European or the NATO mentality. Ukraine was never going to be part of the NATO, not before that war, okay? So what really, I mean, when Russia said to the States or to the NATO countries, give us a solid promise, solid written kind of confirmation that Ukraine will never be a part of the NATO. That's all what Russia wanted, nothing else. And the NATO knew well that they are not going to be part of the NATO. They cannot suffer from putting Ukraine as part of the NATO. So who said no? Who had the upper hand in this position? The United States. Who pushed this war to start? The United States. Europe knows this. Germany knows this. They are suffering more than anyone else because of that
But
war.
actually, the United States and Russia both are at a kind of tit-for-tat actions. And definitely China also is... so we're speaking here about big powers. And big powers are controlling the whole scene, and everybody else is suffering.
But
And
yes.
that brings me to the whole idea of the United Nations General Assembly session and a requirement or an aspiration from nations for a world body to really be able to control the situation or put a kind of rules. Right. Before we continue on with our discussion, let me first take this second report on the 78th session of the UNGA. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls for reforms in Security Council. Let's watch.
The 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, commenced its high-level week spanning from September 19th till September 26th. Addressing the session, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for reforms in multilateral institutions such as the Security Council and said it is reform or rupture. Speaking about the conflict in Ukraine, Guterres said, "The world badly needs Ukrainian food and Russian food and fertilizers to stabilize markets and guarantee food security, and I will not give up on my efforts to make it happen." Unquote. Guterres also urged the pursuit of peace and the resolution of differences. This significant event occurs amid challenges such as the ongoing Ukraine conflict, climate change, public health concerns, and geopolitical instability, all of which are posing obstacles to addressing urgent global issues. The theme of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly is rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. Except US President Joe Biden of the United States, none of the other leaders of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, namely Russia, China, France, and Britain, are attending the UN General Assembly session. France and Britain will be represented by a delegation of ministers. While delivering a speech to the 193-member assembly, US President Joe Biden expressed his commitment to supporting Ukraine, emphasizing that the security of nations is at risk if Ukraine faces partition. Biden also highlighted notable achievements such as the establishment of an economic corridor connecting India, the Middle East, and Europe, as well as the African Union's inclusion in the G20 grouping during the summit in India. Additionally, in his speech, he called for global collaboration to regulate artificial intelligence, the AI, and affirmed the United States' dedication to cooperating with China on critical issues like climate change. The Council's focus for the 78th UN General Assembly revolves around a steadfast commitment to multilateralism and upholding rules-based international order. Given the existence of several global crises, including Russia's conflict with Ukraine, challenges in the Africa's Sahel region, and the pressing climate emergency, the primary objectives are as follows: accelerating the implementation of sustainable development goals, strengthening global governance in line with the UN Secretary General's proposals on our common agenda, and building global partnerships.
Right, welcome back. And according to the UN Secretary General, a call for reforming the UN Security Council and a multilateralism system to be able to find solutions for the political crises. So, Dr. Safty, and you're reading to what the UN Secretary General has said and demanded, and
everyone has the privilege to dream. No one can stop anyone from dreaming. It's a very nice thing. To have your own dreams is a great thing, okay? It makes you have some sort of hope at a certain time that something will happen. But that does not mean clearly that you are aware with what's going on, okay? These kind of talks, when I hear it, and after those small, very nice words being directed to the only president who is attending this assembly, which is President Biden, while all the other members of the Security Council, presidents and prime ministers, did not attend this assembly, this tells you the Secretary of the United Nations is a very nice, optimistic, dreaming person. Okay, that's not a bad thing to happen, but that does not mean that it's going to be real at any time. The Council the Council itself is losing its power because the parts who formed this council are now in conflict together. Okay, what exactly is the council is made for? It's made so that the world will not go into conflict together. Now the members of this council, the members of those council, they are in war together. Okay, and you are telling me, let's try to make it bigger. Let's make more countries and more culture join that council. Well, try to keep this council first. If you could make it survive to the next 5 years, I might be able to hear those suggestions 4 years from now if it lasted, if this council or if the whole United Nations lasted. Okay, what's going on, the chaos which is going on in the world now, politically, militarily, and economically at the same time, this is a very ironic scene. What's going in the world is truly ironic. Tell me what do you see is positive? How can you prospect the future? Okay, even for those wide countries, for those incredibly strong countries, if they go into conflict together, no one can have proper prospections for the futures. And the actual victims for this kind of conflict is not them alone. No, almost the whole world is a victim for what's going on. Okay, huge kind of conflicts is going through the whole African continent. Okay, mention a place in Africa which we don't have a problem. Okay, try to mention a place in the dark-skinned Africa that we don't have kind of conflict. Okay,
Swaziland.
Well, that's a huge part of the dark part of Africa. Okay, who is making those conflicts happen? Okay, do you know what's ironic? Those countries does not produce by any means any kind of military weapons, right or not?
No.
Okay.
No, they just receive.
Who is giving them those armament, okay, to go into war together? You need to understand what's going on. It's who are the countries who produce the armament forces, the armament weapons and everything? States, parts of Europe, Russia, China, North Korea, right or not? The other parts of the world are consumers. Trump, 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, he asked the NATO to make the defense budget doubled or tripled. Okay, that was a Trump period when he first came into charge for the United States. He had a meeting with the NATO where he asked them to double or triple the defense budget. Why did he ask for this? Because he wants the military industry in the States to work again without going into a war. Okay, but the NATO countries at that time, especially Germany and France, refused this because they need those kind of resources for economical development. Okay, now who are consuming his own armament through the conflict with Russia and in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Germany, France, and European countries. Okay, who are buying, tripling, and 4 times and 5 times the budget of the defense now? The NATO countries. Okay, who are taking this money? Who is the producer for this kind of weapon and so on? Is the main supplier is the United States. Okay, there is other suppliers, but they are very little when it comes to matter of percentage. 80% at least of the budget of the defense budget of the NATO is going to the American economy. 20% being spread around other countries as well. Okay.
I guess that was also one reason Egypt refused to take part in such an issue when it was asked to give Ukraine some of the
Russian weapons that we used to have before.
No, rather weapons that we have.
That's right.
That we made.
Well, that's one of the light points in the dark tunnel we're going through.
But it shows
politically,
that
politically, the kind of being in the middle between everyone, okay? And this is maybe why we are a little bit suffering when it comes to economical part, because when you don't choose parts, well, the idea is when you don't choose parts, you don't get support, you don't get paid
yes,
for not choosing parts.
indeed. They keep putting you in pressure all the time,
Yes.
so that's
Trying to pressure you to take part, okay?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, why am I saying a little? We have went through worse than this.
definitely.
I was born in 1966, so I was young at 1967, and I was like 8 years at 1973, and I was 12 years at 1977. I remember this period of time.
Yes, yes.
I remember
definitely.
how things was bad, but yet we could together go through and pass this period.
No doubt.
This is the idea.
No doubt.
That's why I'm saying a little, because the point of comparison is what are you comparing to? I'm comparing to the period between 1967 and 1977.
I'm
If I compare
not
what I'm going through.
doubting this one second. I'm just mentioning the kind of pressure we are being put because we're not succumbing to some of the demands. Let's get back to what we were speaking about, and Egypt. In this whole scene, Egypt was able, for an instant, Minister Sema Shukri has been holding meetings with the friends of Sudan and neighboring countries, and the 50 countries.
He's a realistic person. I mean, what do we have to do with all of this? What we really are interested in was what's happening in Sudan, okay?
And the climate change.
This is the idea. This is what we are, I mean, this is being realistic. So he focused on the issue that can be solved, okay, by discussion. Or even if it's not solved, we can have some sort of a progress in this issue. This is being realistic. Don't address huge issues which nothing will happen. Try to take issues which you might have a kind of progress and try to put a pressure on them. What Sam Shokri did was being very realistic. What do we have to get in this? What we have to do is we need Sudan to be stable. Why? Because actually Sudan has a lot to do with Egypt. Okay? Sudanese and Egyptians all through history, they were so tied together. And until now we are tied together. Okay? What's happening in Ethiopia is frightening. More than even what's happening in Sudan. The kind of war that is going in Sudan will put Ethiopia on ease, because before this kind of war, this instability which is going in Sudan now, Ethiopia used to face Egypt and Sudan together in one position. Now, unfortunately, this instability position which Sudan is in is putting another pressure on Egypt in its own argument with Ethiopia. Imagine what happened in Libya.
Actually,
if this happened in Ethiopia, how catastrophic this is going to be.
Actually, the war in Sudan is reflecting on both Egypt and Ethiopia.
Yes, but not the same.
Yes,
The reflect is not
definitely.
the same. This is the idea. It might have more reflect on Chad than Ethiopia, okay? Because the refugees going from Sudan, they either go to Chad or to Egypt, okay? What sort of reflection does it have on Ethiopia actually? I mean, what kind of reflect Ethiopia is suffering from the war going on Sudan?
Some of the mercenaries and those who are outlaw, and they would really
They would move from Ethiopia to Sudan or vice versa?
vice versa.
Well, there is South Sudan in between.
Yes,
Okay,
but
they have to cross South
but
Sudan.
it's okay. I mean, moving
I'm
in these areas. I mean,
definitely
yes,
this kind
Sudan
of
is
suffering.
very dangerous.
And it's very stressful for Egypt, for the Egyptian economy, and for the Egyptian political side, and for the Egyptian armament side. Okay, why the economy? We have over 400,000 refugees moving to Egypt now.
Yes,
okay,
indeed.
they are adding to the millions that we already have now as refugees from every part. Okay, the climate change, which is causing a problem in Darna in Libya, that's putting a pressure on us in here as well.
Morocco,
Morocco,
Libya,
all of those countries.
Greece.
This is the idea. Okay, so in everything that's going around you. It's like someone is targeting, basically, is going ahead, targeting to put you in more and more deep problems, okay? The 400,000, maybe 100,000 or something, maybe 20, 30, whatever kind of number of refugees moving into the Egyptian country, that's a very stressful position to the Egyptian economy, okay? They are not moving from their countries to our country with huge wealth. They are running for their lives.
I only have 2 minutes left for me here, and from your point of view, sir, if we should be seeing any prospects from this world body, what should it be?
Okay, it should be keeping calm. It should be trying to make our interests smaller and smaller, to focus more on our country, the region around us, not to focus in the global position, because we have very little to say in the global position. This is a true thing. This is being realistic, by the way. And when we do this, when we focus on the small areas around us, the region around us, we will be able to pass the different crises will keep evolving. I mean, this is not like of a crisis that's going to start and end. The World Bank itself said that it might take a decade for the world economy to be able to be healthy again.
Hopefully not.
Well, this is the World Bank expectation.
Not.
Okay, decade is 10 years, by the way.
And
that's a decade.
And that's a short time?
We have been in this for the last 3 years. If you try to understand that 3 years have went out of that decade, okay.
And we're okay with those three years.
So we have
and
to keep calm, focus on our region, try to go through all of these different crises, which is evolving, with the least possible losses. Okay?
Hopefully these crises would come to an end, because it's terrible and it's reflecting terribly on the whole world. What I meant here was what we need from a world body like the UN, and I guess
there is nothing that they can do. Okay?
But there is something to be done with the world body itself.
We need.
Yes.
Okay? But actually, being realistic, they will do nothing. Okay? They don't have this kind of power. Okay?
Unless they have this power and a multilateralism system to govern.
Well, that will happen someday, but not in the short-seen future.
Not for the foreseen, indeed. Professor Ahmed Mostafa, Safty Professor of Economics, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for your input here. And I guess that takes us to the end of this episode. Next debate will be on Sunday. Many thanks for watching, and good night.